Hello and welcome to News9. I'm joined here today by a very interesting personality, a military veteran who's seen action of a kind that few Indian veterans have. Col Pavithran, cybersecurity expert, or should I say, information warfare specialist.
That might be a better introduction than cybersecurity. Cybersecurity is only one small part of information warfare.
IW Ops, how did you get into it? Infantry officer from the Sikh LI, how did you get into information warfare?
That's again a long story. I've said this story in a couple of places, but to just...
Give us the short version.
Okay, so I transited after 10 years in the infantry to military intelligence, basically for a posting to Bangalore. And when I came there, I had already made up my mind that I wanted to do something different, maybe out of the military. And then soldiering was over. No? Now it's going to be more of, after 10 years, soldiering is over. And then I had applied for a loan for a computer. Those days, pay was very less. So as an instructor, I used to get a loan, JLA Bareilly. I had applied there, and the loan came when I was here, and computer. So I was thinking, if I have to do something outside, I need to at least master the computer. So I got into it. One case where I started realizing, oh, cyber security, that the name.
This is the late 1990s.
Yeah. So this would be the early 2000.
Early 2000. A few years after the internet had come into India.
Yes, few years. It still used to be 2 Mbps lines and cyber cafes
Yeah,
in Bangalore. Cyber cafes in
lines.
Bangalore.
Yeah.
And there was an interesting case which we solved out, and the army itself was not ready to take that, because people never understood that you can catch a ISA agent through the net.
An ISA agent?
Yes, I mentioned the story.
In Bangalore?
In Bangalore. So it was not caught in Bangalore, but he was discovered while I sat there in Bangalore.
Right.
And there is another famous, much more colorful character called Colonel Bakshi.
Right.
He was the guy who gave me the money.
The name rings a bell.
He was the guy who gave me the money to start it off.
Right.
And then I got into it, and it was a fascinating thing. But typically the army, what it does is they are very straitjacketed. They want you to do what they want you to do. But I continued this as a hobby.
So this ISA agent has triggered me. How did you get hold of this ISA agent? You're sitting in Bangalore when you caught him? And where was this agent?
That was a counterintelligence organization. Right. And their job was to discover, foreign operatives trying to penetrate into this. And that was a job. So once I started understanding this cybersecurity, spying using the internet, etc., I realized that I just needed to create certain spyware, right. And then I knew how to deploy it and where to deploy it. Because
right.
Those days, we did not have...
We didn't have smartphones.
We didn't have smartphones. We
had cyber cafes.
Cyber cafes.
And for those of you who don't know what a cyber cafe is like a coffee shop, but with computers. And because you don't have internet on your phones, you go into a cyber cafe, you pay a certain amount. What was the money in those days? How much did you pay for an hour of...
20 rupees. But then I was, but I had managed my own cyber cafe. I had managed just make friends with the cyber cafe,
right.
2-3 people. They never used to know what I was doing.
Right.
So I used to just come and hang around there as if, chatting on it. But I was, doing something slightly more interesting. And Badmer was a location where we initially discovered that. Because
Badmer in Rajasthan on the border with China.
It was part of
border with Pakistan.
Yes. So that was the place where we actually discovered the first one. We couldn't catch him in my time, but later on it was caught, and then I got to have a certain name that, okay, this is the guy who did something unusual.
Right.
That's how I got into this game. And I being a background was in infantry, and then everyone wants to be, basically you're a professional soldier, and so you have to contribute. And then I started getting into ICT. I understood this is the information age. Then I started realizing that, hey, this internet, the way it is being told, how it can be controlled, etc., doesn't seem to match. And then when you start reading the literature, then you understand that it's a much bigger game which happens, So I grew along with it.
Right.
And maybe I was one of the first to say that this is a strategic domain. Right. And this is a domain which all major nations are concentrating on to become a cyber power.
Right. So how did you catch that ISI agent in the cyber cafe?
So we just managed to install certain spyware onto some cyber cafes, and started getting that logs back.
Right.
And we realized that this guy every time logs on, using different identities. I think he had about 40 plus identities.
Right.
The only thing was he had one password for the 40 plus IDs, so we knew it was the same guy.
Right.
And he used to keep moving, not only in Badmer, he used to keep moving around.
Right.
Okay, but once
along the border.
Right from Rajasthan to Pune, he used to keep traveling.
Right. And this guy was ISI, like he was a sleeper, or he was
he was a Pak citizen.
Right. A Pak citizen living
From
undercover.
From Sindh province, who was
From Sindh.
inserted by the
Right.
Pak intelligence agencies via Nepal into India.
Right. And what is his name, if you're at liberty to disclose?
I forget his name. This is so too old, no?
Yeah.
And he had, I forget his name actually. Although I just have this is quite an old thing.
Yeah.
And after that, we progressed.
And you nabbed him. And
No, we did not. He was nabbed by the IB.
Right.
Okay. But when they came, they bring these guys to the joint intelligence this, and everyone
Yes.
knew, oh, this is the guy we have been following for
Right.
almost 2+ years.
So this is like catching a spy in a cyber cafe at the very dawn of the internet age. And
I wouldn't say exactly the dawn, but yes, people didn't realize the intelligence potential of this.
Right.
And at that time, people were basically concentrating on phones, who is talking to Pakistan. But people have realized that, increasingly the internet was a place.
Yes.
And India had still not reached a place where they knew how to monitor this in a much more comprehensive way.
Right.
Okay, so basically it was like an M, You have this domain, so we just climbed it, from a human
Right.
intelligence point, we managed to, study this and bring out a better way of doing intelligence.
Right.
So you've changed how intelligence started getting gathered.
Right.
So it is not that the military intelligence was the first one. The other agencies also were doing it.
Yeah, all the agencies were
but
on
they
it.
did not have a military mind to look at
Right.
that whole, framework.
Right.
And when I started understanding the entirety of, then I realized that's a tool for warfare. And what is information warfare? And we also had started, the Indian Army had transited to, they had operational branches which was dedicated to information warfare. But then I looked at it in a slightly more strategic way.
Right.
And how, controlling of narratives, how to create narratives, why people are giving free social media this for,
Yes.
where is the money, what is the importance of data, how did privacy come along as a
Right.
concept. All this is very fascinating, So I was one of the first to understand this.
Right. So 20 years later, we are looking at the internet. There are no cyber cafes. Cyber cafes have all gone. They've probably gone back to being cafes. You have possibly what's one of the largest, most powerful surveillance tools ever invented, ever devised, on which you have a lot of apps that are riding, including ours, News9 Plus. Do watch and download. But you have apps, you have spyware installed on these, and every smartphone is like a tracking device. Tell us how things have changed in 20 years and why the smartphone is possibly the most powerful surveillance tool ever.
So the smartphone is a device which is at the pinnacle of where innovation is taking place, because there's huge amount of money. You look at the whole globe is on this.
Yes.
And you can imagine the amount of R&D which is going to make it more compact, add on more hardware to make it much more potent.
Right.
Okay.
And wearable devices, now you're talking of
Yeah,
smartphones
yeah.
where you don't even have a smartphone body. You'd probably be wearing it on your
can
palm.
get into it. IoTs,
Yes.
okay, your smart watches.
Right.
So all this can be, data which is directly taken from the environment.
Right.
With all those devices which are beyond, like we hear, voices between a certain frequency.
Yeah.
But the sound frequencies can be much lower and higher.
Right.
That can hear it.
Yes.
The light which we see is in certain wavelengths, limited.
Right.
This can see much beyond that.
Right.
Okay, plus many more, devices. Just imagine all that getting collected, and it's always, if you notice,
Yes.
till 5-10 years back, you had physical switches to switch it off.
Yes.
You could take out the battery.
Right.
Do you now realize there is no physical switch?
There is
to
no
switch it off?
physical switch. It's you have to
And
switch it
then
off
there
or
is
you
no-
keep it at a distance.
And then there is no, you can't take out the battery anymore.
Right. So it's making it more difficult for the consumers to kind of leave their phones behind. And plus, people are addicted to their phones. I mean,
Yes,
you see
so-
people hunched over their phones all the time.
So you will slowly realize these things are not happening by accident. It is by
Right.
design. It is for a particular purpose.
Right.
The purpose in an innovation, this is made for profit. It evolves, but along with that profit comes much more dangers.
Right.
That is the surveillance industry.
Yes.
Behind it sits the deep state.
The surveillance industry and the deep state.
Yes.
So, as someone said very famously, I forget who, but it's in all this era of social media, free this and free that. What are they selling?
So
You are the product they're selling.
So the beauty of the Western system is, firstly, they don't believe in any free meals.
Right.
They are not a society which believes
Yes.
in free meals. So there is something which is definitely, but their beauty is they create such interesting narratives, catchy narratives, like global village,
Right.
the earth is flat.
Yes.
Very attractive ideas.
Right.
Is it a global village? Is the earth really flat? So is this social media really free? Where are they making their money? For example, WhatsApp.
Yes.
The biggest market is here in India.
Right.
They've got a differential privacy policy for only Indians. because we didn't have a law to protect us.
Right.
For the rest of the world, it's a different privacy policy. India, different privacy policy.
Yeah, India would be one of the biggest markets in the world. It's like 1.4 billion people. It's the most populated country in the world.
I would not call it a market, I would call it a farm.
We've had this conversation in the past many years back, and I always thought you were a conspiracy theorist. And it would be in here and out from here. And then Snowden happened. And we started listening to you very carefully because everything that Snowden mentioned is what you'd been warning of.
So I think I've told this before. 1,000 years hence,
Yes.
when you look at Snowden, he might appear to be like the Jesus Christ of the information age.
Right.
Okay? The Messiah who came to warn the masses and the people.
Right. Depends on which side of the debate you're looking at him from. For the West, he'd be Judas. He's the one who betrayed all our secrets, who told the rest of the world we were snooping on everyone.
Okay, so if you look at Snowden, he did not want to betray the West.
Yes.
He realized that this, if you see what he is saying, finally they will end up eating the West also. Finally power will be concentrated in the hands of a very
Corporations.
few. The people who control the corporations.
Right.
They themselves will finally retard into surveillance societies.
Yes.
Where the few will control everyone. And you will slowly realize all the democratic rights which you have, today got, which has been acquired over the last few centuries, because industrial production and everything, you had to share power with the people for that thing to work. Then slowly with AI and data, etc., you will realize few people don't need the support of the rest of them to control. And then you will realize the entire politics, your rights, your human this, everything will slowly start getting rolled back.
Right, and your robots will take over.
Will they take over, or will the people behind the robots will control? We don't know.
Right.
But one thing is certain, that the average Aam Aadmi is going to be not going to be that independent, is not going to have the life which they have today. And even if they are there, they're talking about a universal basic, what are you going to be? You're just going to be another animal on the farm. So the Snowden, what did he basically say? That whatever you are, iconic corporations of the US, which are Google, Microsoft, whatever you have, and they denoted, liberalism and human rights and all that.
World is flat.
Yes, but he brought out that it is not so. These are corporate industry which is deeply in bed with the deep state of, the military-industrial complex, deep state and American, imperial, colonial power, all that he gave us a glimpse.
Right, and more directly, it was the fact that you had an agency like the NSA, which is all-powerful, which has a budget bigger than all the intelligence agencies combined, and they were apparently accessing backdoors in all of these operating systems that these corporations had been selling across the world.
So not only the operating systems, but the switches, networks, servers, their motto is simple: we grab everything.
Right.
Now that grabbing everything in 2013 and grabbing today totally changed with advent of AI.
Right.
Because at that time, the data is so much, how can you physically make sense out of it?
Yes.
But if the machines are going to become intelligent and AI is going to this, they will be able to understand what this is.
They can do in nanoseconds what would take you probably days and weeks
Which
to...
you might never be able to, a human mind might not be able to comprehend the whole of the data.
Right.
So AI machine might be able to.
Right.
Now we can't visualize this because we don't get that sort of data, neither do we have access to.
Right.
We only have access to what others have created.
Right.
And we don't have data. But both China and the US understand this because they are the actual cyber powers.
Yes.
They are controlling all the stacks and they've got independent this.
Right.
So their vision of the world is different.
Right.
And they understand what is happening. And if you study both their literature and how they accuse each other.
Right.
Why do you think the Americans always blaming the Chinese?
Cyber espionage, this vacuuming all our
they understand
data.
the dangers. They understand the dangers of that. Now look at the laws which have taken place. China has totally weaponized their entire industry. They said all Chinese citizens, all Chinese companies will work towards security of the Chinese state. Okay? What does it mean?
So everybody is an extension of the Chinese state.
They've realized the West has already done it.
Right.
So they are also formalizing it.
With their corporations.
Yes. The West has done it in a much more subtler fashion.
Right.
The Chinese are doing it in a much more direct fashion, or it has been projected because the Western media is projecting it to us and we are English consumers. So we say, oh, China is doing that.
Right.
But China is only copying the West.
China is only copying the West. And in a couple of years from now, India will be the third largest economy in the world. what are the steps that we should start taking to ensure that we become a cyber power with a fair amount of sovereignty over our resources, our data, our ICT, hardware, software, all of that?
So if you look at the internet, who created the internet? The DARPA created it.
Yes.
Okay. And
It was a military project.
Yes, and who controls it today? People feel it's a widely separated network which no one has control over. That is not true. It is controlled by an organization called ICANN.
Right.
Okay, so they've got 13 root zone servers, instances of 13 root zone servers, and there are millions of small instances which are there all over the world to fasten up the internet. But if you look at what ICANN says, and they say that if access to ICANN servers, the root zone servers doesn't exist, this internet of that particular area will wither away within about 7 days.
Right.
So that means India, we are trying to achieve, make our entire economy 100% digital.
Yes.
And what does that mean? That everything is networked, connected to the internet, and people can ride over the whole thing, and wealth rapidly starts getting created.
Yeah, that's the promise of
Yes, and
digital India.
Yeah, so if you look at what is this actual connections, it is all undersea cables.
Yes.
And a little bit of satellite connections. So these undersea cables is defendable. If they get cut off, or ICANN decides to switch off the connection.
Them off. Yes.
Okay, .in, right click, delete. 7 days kaput, your whole economy is down.
Right.
Okay, so that is control and narrative, because that's where the money is. So people are just following the money. They realize this is human interest, they will go for it.
Right.
But is it a well thought out decision, or is it just that we are just following the herd? Okay. Now you look at what Russia and China has done. China was cautious of the West, so they created controls over their social media.
The great Chinese firewall.
So the great Chinese firewall is a word which
The West coined. Yeah, of course.
Okay, I don't think there is. They have got certain control. They've tried to control that, because of which they've got their own corporations. This that which has come up, and they have managed to. Now Putin, when he realized that the color revolutions can disturb Russia, he then said, okay, he started, because they definitely did not have an idea, but he did rapid course corrections. So what are the military exercises they have done? He has given directive that the Russian internet should work even if the connections to ICANN is cut off.
Right.
And what did the Americans immediately say? In this internet, it cannot happen. If you don't have this, it will stop functioning. But he has created hardware, they have deployed it, and the Russian military has done exercises to test if the connections are cut, will the internet hold up?
Yes.
Likewise for China.
Yes.
In India, I have not heard any literature on that. Our entire hardware is built using Chinese and American hardware and software.
Right.
So, in case, firstly they get the data.
Yeah.
Secondly, in case there is ever a conflict, they can strike deep within you.
Without you even knowing about it.
Yeah, you can say that. If you look at Mumbai, the power station which got shut down.
The power grids that went down.
Who told us that China is, shut it down? So it's an American company. We had no clue.
Yes.
We kept on saying no. Although we had access to the graphical user interface, or people were there.
Yeah.
Finally, we conceded yes.
Yes.
But if you look at the truth, we still don't know the truth, because we don't control any of these layers.
Right.
Okay.
Whereas they
are
go
getting
all the way down.
And how are they able to sit when people physically in charge of that infrastructure is not able to?
Right.
How are companies sitting in mainland US or China able to see? Because they control all these networks.
Right.
They get the data. They get to see everything.
Right.
That's why. So
and they can detect that unusual activity, that point.
whatever they are detecting, because we don't know what they are detecting, because they've got control over all the OSI layers. Okay, we only have control over the layer 7 where the application layers are.
Right.
So if you look at the Microsoft Bill Gates,
Yes.
he just took out a statement. Oh, Indians should build AI applications on top of Microsoft and Google.
Of course.
So who
Sell
will then
more
Microsoft
and
So
Google.
who will then finally control India? No.
Right.
If AI is going to take over everything, it's going to
Yes.
revolutionize everything. Who is going to be the people down below?
This is alarming actually what you said, because and also for India it's a big challenge, because we were talking about a little while earlier about India's strategic autonomy. The fact that why did we go down the path of building our own nuclear weapon arsenal? Because we were not part of any other alliance whereby say a NATO will come to your assistance if you are under attack, because we have not signed on. We are not treaty allies with anyone. So to ensure our own safety, survival, security of our people, we had to create our own nuclear weapons thing to ensure we are not threatened. But what you're suggesting is that we have the nuclear weapons to protect our physical security and the survival of the state. We don't have the tools that will protect our people, will not protect digital India.
So India, our problem is we are too large. So then they say, why don't we go small? But if you go small, then we can get physically. This is our history.
Right.
Okay. If you become too small and independent nations, even today there are fights for reverse sharing between states. This, that. We are too diverse.
Right.
So how do we protect India? So that means finally the Indian elite realize that you have to be one state. You're a civilizational state. Okay. You have waxed and waned over time. Whenever we have waned, other people could come in. Whenever you have grown, but we have restricted because of certain geographical features. So this is our history. Okay.
But where does data sovereignty fit into this?
So in data sovereignty, people have written about it.
Yeah.
Basically, it looks like if you talk about data sovereignty, first is you need control over your architecture,
Right.
which is from the entire gamut of hardware and software. So can you control entire gamut of hardware and software? There is Putin, a much smaller nation, which is given that by 2026, he says, I want the entire software of Russia
Right.
using Russian companies. So
only Russian companies, no
yes,
foreign.
no foreign, no Chinese, no American. They have not said,
Right.
Here we have now said no Chinese.
Right.
Okay, we have still not said no Western.
So then break down for me, for you as an information warfare specialist. Of course, there are a lot of areas that you can't talk about, which I know of, what the kind of work that you've done in the past, but that's a story for another day. That is if you agree to speak on those aspects. But when you say Atmanirbhar Bharat, are we so fixated only on the hardware part of it that, oh, we've got a tank, oh, we've got a plane, we've got a warship or a submarine, or we're making our own computers, we're making our own iPhones, for instance. Define for us as an IW specialist what Atmanirbhar Bharat means to you.
Okay, so firstly, Atmanirbhar, if you look at it, is a concept that we should own the technologies.
Yeah.
We should benefit out of making these technologies. We should get our jobs over here. That's a very,
Yeah.
And then we realize also that if you are dependent on other countries for your armaments, you cannot be, sovereign because they'll dictate.
Of course, they'll dictate, they'll twist your tail and they'll
Yes.
make sure you can't fight
But
a war.
more important,
Yeah.
in the olden days, if you buy a gun from someone, second I get the gun and ammunition, I can turn around and shoot you.
Right.
Okay. Maybe in the intelligence age, just think about a AI-enabled gun. You then point towards, maybe they put some AI into it, and maybe there is something in it which says, okay, if you point at me, firstly it will not fire, and more dangerous, it say, if he tries to kill me, he should kill the guy who's operating the
No,
gun.
probably go off in the.
Yeah. Likewise for all fighters, tanks, etc. This is possible. They can also switch it off remotely.
Yes, kill switches.
Yes. Okay. So now you're beginning to understand. So that is the military part. The rest is, what is information age? That means everything which you have got is connected to the information communication technology.
Yes.
More intelligence is going to come into all these things.
Right.
And control and the data. So if I've got, even Sun Tzu says, if I know everything about the enemy and I know everything about myself, what is the result? 100% victory.
Yes.
Correct? So
you know his weaknesses, you know everything. You know his,
and you know your own weaknesses
Right.
and strengths. So today in India, do we know ourselves? Clearly the Mumbai power station attack says that we do not know about our own selves.
Right.
But others are aware of us.
Our weaknesses, our
Yes.
vulnerabilities.
So we are not aware of ourselves. We definitely are not aware of other nations. So the result is going to be 100% defeat in whatever endeavors. If they allow you any victory in any endeavor, whether be it business, be in politics, etc., it is what they have allowed you to win. So that is the danger of AI. A society dystopian in such a way where you don't even realize that it's very subtly being manipulated, no?
Yeah, it sounds scary because if you're talking of a war which begins where we are taught to believe that a war would be like Gulf War. That was the first big war that was televised. And the opening barrage of the Gulf Storm, Desert Storm, was this barrage of cruise missiles, smart bombs and cruise missiles and bombing. and missile attacks and all of that, artillery, that opening salvos. And you're saying that the next war, if ever a next war takes place, somebody tries to attack us, the opening salvos are going to be grid failures basically. Massive grid failures, shutdowns,
if you look
water,
at the,
electricity.
If you look at the literature, we have now started talking about grey zone warfare.
Right.
So what is grey zone warfare? Anything below the threshold of actual kinetic war.
Yeah.
Okay. Then if you also start realizing the Indian Army started talking about for the first time multi-domain warfare.
Yes.
So basically it is going to be no war and no peace. It's a constant state of competition.
Yes.
Now if the Chinese have weaponized all their industry and people, and the West also have done that, so that means there is no peace. They're always competing with you for resources,
Right.
business, ideas, everything.
So how do you get to Atmanirbhar Bharat? So coming back to my question, how would you define Atmanirbhar Bharat as an IW professional?
Concept. So this is the information age, and the ICT is like the nervous system of the human body.
Right.
Okay, for a nation. So if you do not have control over that ICT system, okay, the core ICT systems and the products and the data, you have no control. So even if you get a law saying, oh, privacy, data localization, how do you do it with foreign hardware and software when everything is being backdoored?
Right.
So firstly, you need to get the foundational part of the entire network under your control, right from the hardware to the application systems. You can allow other applications to exist provided you are in a position to monitor them. That's how the world is moving. Right. And we also need to do the same, because unlike smaller countries, they will be allowed to rise. Yes. India, they will be able to, they will say, if we allow them to rise, yes, they become the biggest, economic power under one political this.
For us to become an autonomous software power on par with, say, China and the United States, what's the role model that we should follow? Is it President Putin? Is it Xi Jinping? Or is it...
India has to find its own path. See, what works for the Russians and what works for the Chinese might not work for the Indians.
They're totalitarian societies.
Yeah. But once you have declared a certain policy like Atmanirbhar, yes, we then need to go whole hog.
Right.
We need to find out what does it make to create products.
Right.
Where is your strategic venture capital fund? Not there. Can you have organizations which stand to lose their wherewithal in charge of creating Atmanirbhar?
You mean organizations that would lose monopolies if they were to truly encourage Atmanirbhar?
So my this is, let's declare a policy and let's get it done.
What is a strategic venture capital fund? I mean, tell me more about it.
Okay, so the most famous name here is In-Q-Tel. Right. Okay, In-Q-Tel is a venture capital company created by the CIA. Right. And who granted them the funds? The American Congress. Okay, they're like our parliament. And why did the parliament grant those funds? Because venture capital systems are inherently cannot be neutral.
Right.
Okay. They realized if one government grants it to them, second the other administration will come, they'll say, oh, this is, so the parliament has sanctioned it. Right. Now what will happen if you allow foreign venture capital to create our, technology, will they ever fund anything which is foundationally going to put them at a disadvantage?
Absolutely not.
So what sort of Atmanirbhar are we doing for what purpose?
So then what would be the size of this fund and who would manage it? How would it be set up?
So this system has to be managed. When you copy, since we are a democratic nation, we follow other democratic nations. How have they created it? Who is running it? Industry professionals. Right. Because venture capital systems are, like I said, not fair systems. Okay, this venture capital manager, out of every 10 decisions he takes, okay, only one will succeed. That is the best venture capital funds. The second best might be much lesser. But they are successful this because that one which gets it correct wipes out all the losses. So they are encouraged to put their own money. He's that manager, fund manager is given a survival salary, but he gets to take percentages of the profit. So he is immune to corruption. He doesn't get influenced by anything because if he loses a fund, his name is wiped out. He's not a successful manager. So his interest is to ensure that this is a success. And he will do everything to ensure that it becomes a success. And what do they advertise in In-Q-Tel? For every $1 we put in, the rest of the venture capital ecosystem will put in $9. Why? Now that is backed by the deep state. Yes. They already understood that this is something foundational. Likewise, we need to. Okay, we need to have multiple strategic venture capital funds for the military, for the intelligence, because one fund cannot handle entire India. Right.
So the strategy you're talking of is creating this fund. And
No, so what is missing from the strategy is once you have this fund, that fund has to be a success and that guy has to earn his money. So you tell him that, one is making money, the other is what are the sort of foundational technologies we are looking into it. Let him invest and let the rest of it. Then once he interests that Indian Strategic Venture Capital Fund has put money into this, oh, the rest of the venture capital knows, oh, this is like our Huawei, let us put money into it. They'll all bloody grow, tuck. And that becomes the default for the Indian system. They'll buy. That is how it will happen. Then you create a law saying that in this critical infrastructure, only companies which have got our people and our fund should. That's how you create it. It will happen overnight. Let me try and explain this to you. We created a commission, okay, where there was a retired naval officer who was being paid by Huawei. Okay, he's an American citizen. He migrated. He was a retired Indian citizen, eminent person who got the Marconi Award. He is now a US citizen. Now we put him in part of a head of a committee which will decide Indian interests. So he said there is no threat in Huawei because as an American citizen, he's sworn to protect American this.
yeah.
He's talking about a third country where Huawei is, Chinese government is paying him. He said no. For people like us, I don't blame him. Who put him as the head of that committee?
No, I mean, 15 years back when we started this conversation, I remember when the NSA had red flagged a lot of Chinese companies, including Huawei, where they said that, look, we can't afford to give critical information communication technologies to Huawei. There was a UN cry where they said, oh no, Huawei has agreed to set up data centers in India and do R&D here and all of that. But I think we were ahead of the debate then because now the whole West seems to be delinking from China very super aggressively, whether it's Huawei, TikTok for instance.
So the narrative, okay, cybersecurity before Snowden was supposed to be, the world was supposed to be a global village. Everything technology was neutral.
Right. Nobody spied on anyone else.
Yeah.
Especially not allies.
And people like me used to say, hey, there is an inherent danger. This is not what it is. I used to have arguments with professors and other experts from the military itself. They used to say, what are you talking? I said, no, this is actually not a field of technology. Firstly, this is a field of security. That debate was there. It used to be put out there. I know it's security. Finally, who controls the technology controls everything. When Huawei for the first time went ahead of the West in 5G, was when then the nationality of the company mattered. Till that time, what is the narrative? Oh, nationality doesn't matter. It's a global village.
It's a global village. Yeah, the earth is flat.
Now the problem is, after Snowden,
the earth became round after Snowden.
Not in India.
Right.
Everywhere in the globe, the earth became round. In India, a lot of people continued. And these people still rule the roost. They have, because the ITS industry depends on the West for the entire money. These guys, NASCOM, all these organizations, they're totally bad for them.
Right.
Okay, that is how they control Indian narrative.
Thanks very much, Col Pavithran. It's always a pleasure to talk to you, and I learn so much from you every time we meet and every time we speak. And the world after Snowden, 11 years after Snowden, is not as flat as we imagined it to be. It's round. Countries have their interests, and if India has its interests at heart, as you say, as you put it yourself, Atmanirbhar Bharat, if we are to realize our vision of Atmanirbhar Bharat, then we must truly be Atmanirbhar in ICT, especially information communication technologies, which are going to be the way wars of the future. Forget the future, even the wars of the present are being fought using ICT. But thank you very much, Col Pavithran.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.